next speaker. There we go. Our next speaker is Rutger Myers. He is local with Chatfield Farms. He's their soil health technician. So he's going to give us some kind of a primer on soil health.
Yeah. Hello, my name is Rutger Myers. I am the soil health technician here at Chatfield Farms. And I like giving these talks. I don't want it to be like so much of a monologue. If you have questions, feel free to ask as I go. I like to have this be like a conversation if you have questions. First, I'm going to talk about a little bit about my background. I became a farmer in 2019. I started here at Chatfield as a volunteer. And that very same year, a position opened up as a seasonal farmer. I did that for 3 seasons. I traveled back and forth from Florida to Colorado. So I really kind of just went all in. I farmed in the winter in Florida, in the summer up here in Colorado. So just went all in. I just immediately fell in love with farming. I love the culture. I love the people. I love working outside. And I wanted to work here at Chatfield in any capacity. So I saw that there was a channel to work here as a composter. So I came before work, I stayed after work. I started this program with a pitchfork, and I always can include that because there's a lot that you can do just with will and just with brute strength. So that's how I got this program started. I was hired as the soil health technician at the end of the 2021 season. And the first thing I did was I got a grant. So my program now, last year, I produced about 200 cubic yards of finished compost. So that's like maybe like 6 semi trucks full of compost. So to do that, I had to learn how to use a lot of big machines. I use the tractor, I use a skid steer. And I am living every little kid's dream, riding the farmer, riding the tractor around. But also I got a scholarship to study soil science, soil biology. So at the end of the day, I can look under a microscope. So this is a unique job where I can study the science and I can also operate big machines. So that's what the modern farmer is. Probably the most important part of my job is opportunities like this, where I get to share what I do. Just yesterday, I taught the summer camp. I mean, I'm teaching like 5 and 6 year olds microbiology. So like what an absolute dream. So soil health technician, it's kind of like, what is that? I could go like complete composter route. And what a composter does is they get rid of organic material really fast. So like we have A1 compost here. We send out all of our kitchen scraps, everything that can decompose to A1. And they're really incentivized to get through that material as fast as possible. They're trying to process it. They're a municipal waste site. What we've learned as farmers is compost produced that quickly, maybe not what your plant needs. It may be what some plants need, but not all plants. So I enjoy the luxury of letting some of my compost age for a year. If that's what our plant needs, that's what happens. The other side of what a soil health technician might be would be like a soil scientist. So spending a lot of time in a lab, getting soil samples in the mail, extracting nutrients out of that, sending back a report saying these are the nutrients your plant or your soil has, with not much mention of a plant. So if I'm trying to improve my plant growth, I want to see what's happening with the plant. Is this plant in shade? Is this plant getting enough water? There are a lot of factors that a soil lab can't tell you just from looking at soil. So my scholarship, and if you take one thing from my talk today, Dr. Elaine Ingham, INGHAM, the Soil Food Web. This is what I got my scholarship, is to take all of her courses. And what she teaches is microbiology. So there's not much mention of the chemistry that just magically lives in your soil, because all of that is dictated by the biology in your soil. If you take 2 teaspoons of soil, there are more microscopic creatures in that soil than there are people on Earth. So like that much soil, And there's more life in that soil than there are people on the planet. So there's more bacteria and fungi on and in me than there are human cells. So like, it's not just a factor of things that are happening around us. This is, I am bacteria and fungi. Our world, that's how our world operates, is through microbiology. It's really easy to forget that. If I were to classify one thing, what I do in a title would be soil ecology. So studying the ecosystem in our soil, how these little players act in our soil. This is going back to the chemical test you get from your lab. You get a report back that says, okay, you have like this much phosphorus, you have this much boron. These are your nutrient values. And my issue with that, let's see if I use this. So it's not like nutrients are all created equal. There are nutrients that are tied up in your soil particles. That's your total pool of nutrients up here that your plant cannot get to. Your plant needs help to get those nutrients. The same thing with these exchangeable nutrients. Your biology can get to them. They can turn them into soluble nutrients, but the only nutrient your plant can eat is soluble nutrients. And I don't think we really need a whole lot of that to begin with. You just need as much as your plant can consume. So a lot of tests you'll get from the lab are testing how much total or how much exchangeable nutrients you have. And that really doesn't say much about how well your plant's going to perform. This is the measure of soil health. And it's not just the nematode, it's not just the protozoa or bacteria or fungi. You need all of these characters working in tandem together. Okay, so imagine what happens if you say, oh, I have a fungal disease, I'm going to put a carnivorous fungus that eats other fungus on my soil. Well, that might be what you want to do if you want to wipe out your entire fungal population. But you need to think about the repercussions of what you're doing to manage your soil, especially with spraying. I mean, I think we can say, don't spray pesticides or herbicides. So then we talk about the soluble nutrients. And when I say maybe we don't need to add that much soluble nutrients to our plants, this is what's recommended for a typical veggie crop. 200 ppm, 200 parts per million of nitrogen dumped onto your crop. This column here, this is your old growth forest. And that's how much nitrogen is in your old growth forest, 0.1 ppm. And I know that we're not talking about the same plants, but I would say that an old growth forest is the most productive soil on our planet. And maybe it's not growing veggies, but I would say that maybe to grow those giant trees, maybe if you only need 0.1 ppm, you wouldn't need 2,500 times that to grow a tomato. So I think we've been over fertilizing soluble nutrients on our veggie crops. So it takes us back to our nutrients and what we're thinking about. Do we need to add nutrients to our soil? Or do we need to boost the biology that can mine the nutrients off of our soil? Do we have enough nutrients in our soil already? I think we do. How much soluble nutrient do we need? Do we need a lot of soluble nutrient all at once? Soluble means that it dissolves in water. So the next time that it rains or the next time you irrigate, you're going to lose all that soluble nutrient. Your plant can't absorb all that 200 ppm of soluble nutrient. So I would say a productive system never has a lot of soluble nutrients. It just has biology to feed the plant as it needs. So that's nutrients. Get back to biology. When I say the soil ecosystem, it's really easy to think of it as a cycle because that's like how we are taught to think about nutrients, but it's really a web. And it's more complicated to think about it that way. But I think it's more important because if you take one piece out of the web, the whole thing falls apart. You're not jamming up a cycle, you're taking the whole ecosystem apart. So as an example of that, we see nematodes. You say, okay, what does a nematode do in soil? A nematode eats bacteria and fungi, right? So it eats the lower level little organisms. But couldn't a nematode also eat your plant root? Yeah, nematodes eat your plant root. So you say, okay, well, maybe it's a good guy, maybe it's a bad guy. Well, then nematodes also eat other nematodes. So we need nematodes just to regulate the nematode population. So if you took nematodes out of that, you'd have too much bacteria, you'd have too much fungi. Who knows what happens, but they play all these different roles on all different levels of predators or lower level or single cell. They're all over the place. So if you take that one part out of the web, it all will fall down. Okay, back to farming. We run a 6-acre veggie crop production here. So we need to be efficient. So we do till. And when we prep a bed to plant into, we wanted to have the soil flat and workable. So we turn up the surface of the soil. You think about what happens there to that soil food web, you're destroying all the life that lives in the soil. Okay. So has anyone heard of the Green Revolution? So in the 1970s, we had been tilling our soil for a couple decades, and we noticed, hey, this soil is starting to look like dirt, and maybe I'm not getting the nutrients cycled from our soil to feed our plants. So our plant productivity is going pretty far down here. What happens if we dump a bunch of soluble nutrients on that? Well, the plant didn't have any food to begin with. So when it gets a little bit, you're going to see an increase in plant productivity. And we have based our agriculture off this Green Revolution thought ever since. And the problem with that is, yes, you're feeding your plant, but what happens to all the nutrients that don't get to your plant? Do those end up in our waterways? Are those polluting? So I live in Tampa Bay, or I used to live in Tampa Bay. Every time I come home, I see this red tide problem that we're having. And the red tide problem, you can learn a lot about soil biology if you study this red tide. And what's happened is there was a fertilizer leak into the bay. And all the bacteria that wants to eat that fertilizer grows to eat all the fertilizer. Just like us, bacteria breathes in oxygen, so it depletes the water of oxygen. So that's why you'll see a lot of fish dying and a lot of plants dying when there's a red tide. You're getting anaerobic conditions. So you say, how does this relate to soil? It's the same thing. So just like when you over fertilize, you get this bloom of bacteria, and the bloom of bacteria, just like us, breathes in oxygen and then breathes out carbon dioxide. So that's how agriculture has become a major contributor in our carbon emissions, because there's too much bacteria breathing out and it's not staying in the soil. So you say, okay, how do we manage this? So if you look at it like from a geological sense, soil can be sand, clay, or silt. Sand particles, they're like big boulders. They're huge. They're really good at letting water in. They're really not good at holding water. So with sand, you're going to have a leaching problem. So your pollution is going to go straight through and hit your water table, and that's going to get to our drinking water. With a clay soil, it's those platelets. They're not boulders, they're platelets, and they like to stack onto each other. And they're like, maybe like, I don't know, 300 times smaller than sand. They're tiny, tiny, tiny. They're the size of bacteria. And they want to stick together. So what happens in a clay soil is it will hit the surface and it'll run off into the nearest waterway. So either way, we're polluting. I include this because like you could send your soil into a lab, or you could just learn enough about soil to feel it and understand what your soil is. This is from the NRCS, and you can follow this flow chart to say, okay, does it feel gritty? Yeah, it's more likely sand. Is it smooth? Is it, but I really want to get people to just pick soil up and understand, okay, gritty means more sand because I can feel those particles. Smooth, those platelets are sticking together. So I think there's a lot to be said for how we touch, how we feel, how we perceive soil. I think we can learn a lot. So back to runoff and leaching. If we're looking at agriculture today, the organic certification, I think that's amazing, because I don't want to be eating poison. I don't want to be eating pesticides and herbicides. These are poisons that we've made. But I also don't want to be over fertilizing and polluting our waterways. So regenerative agriculture and permaculture, I mean, this is what I grew up in as a farmer. I didn't start until 2019. So this has always been the goal, is to be a regenerative farmer, and I understand if you've been farming for decades, that some new kid on the block comes in and say, oh, you need to be more regenerative of those practices. That's frustrating. So I understand that farmers are going to be a little upset when people are coming in with buzzwords like this. But at the core of these movements, what is regenerative agriculture and permaculture? You are flipping the script of the plant's interaction with soil. So you're building soil to feed your plant. The old thought is when we harvest our plant, we're depleting that plant of the nutrients. And with permaculture or regenerative ag, whatever you want to call it, you're building your soil to feed your plant. Even more specifically, you're putting your plant in a cycle, a self-sustaining cycle, where it feeds the soil that feeds itself. So you take that, yeah, you're building soils for the plants that we eat, but you're also building soils for our planet. And I think that's the part of this new age farming that people don't understand. We're environmentalists. We're trying to fix our world's soil. We're trying to fix the earth. So back to these soil particles. You have runoff over here and leaching over here. What does simple organic matter do? This is not a fertilizer. This is compost. This is things that used to be living on our farm. These are microorganisms. That's organic matter. So in clay, organic matter tends to flocculate these little clay particles, kind of create openings. It makes them repel from each other. And that allows pore space for clay to absorb more water faster. Clay is really good at holding on to water once it's in there, really bad at letting water into that surface. What about sand particles? It does the opposite. So it kind of makes sand and clay kind of meet in the middle. Organic matter and sand particles kind of glues them together and makes these pockets that want to hold on to water. So your sand can already take in a lot of water, but instead of having it just flow right through, the organic matter will kind of hold that water in place. So think about what that does to our plants. Yeah, we have to water less, but think about what happens there is we're filtering our water before it hits the water table. So the longer that water spends in your soil, you're cleaning it. So this is an environmental endeavor. And when I say like the same for nutrients as for water, if you're more likely to retain moisture, you're more likely to retain nutrients. And when I say a less leachable form of nitrogen, what I mean by that is I mean the literal bodies of bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes, and microarthropods. So it's not some gas or substance that they're putting off. It's literally their body. They're made of nitrogen. So that's how we're fixing nitrogen. That's nitrogen fixation is through the literal biology. And then you think about carbon sequestration. That's like our big like world saver. That's through the bodies of fungi. And fungi is really good at sequestering carbon because with enough time, this little mycelial web will kind of take over the soil and your soil will be just as much fungi as it is anything else. That's a forest. A forest wants a lot of fungus. But then think about, well, on another aside, these right here, another thing that fungus does is it traps and eats nematodes. So the nematode that eats a fungus kind of has a mouth with a little spear on it. And it's swimming around and it's trying to like stick into the fungal hyphae, suck out nutrients like a straw. And this fungus has developed this like little lasso piece. And if it's touched, it blows up and it inflates and it chokes out the nematode. So these are the things that are happening in soil. But think about what happens with this little cube of soil. If I were to till this up every year, more likely it's like a couple times a year you'd be tilling as a farmer. So I've started direct microscopy. This is my most proud fungus I've found so far. It's beneficial fungus. So I really enjoy taking the time and looking under a microscope. I don't think all farmers would enjoy that, but that's my role as a farmer. This is a nematode trying to eat bacteria in this aggregate. What the bacteria does is it produces glomalin. So the same sticky stuff that sticks sand particles together, the soil glue is what they call it. And the bacteria produces this to protect itself from being eaten by nematodes. So out of self-preservation, it's making soil structure. And it also does this because bacteria doesn't want to wash away every time it rains or every time you irrigate. So it makes these little protective glue layers, and that's what keeps our soil together. So understanding that farmers don't want to look under a microscope, or maybe are hesitant to, I work a lot with simple physical tests. This is one where you're testing the aggregate stability. You're putting soil in a sieve and you're dipping it in and out of water, and you're seeing what soil could keep its structure and what soil could absorb water. That's the soil that's alive. So if you do this the same way every year and you measure how much soil is alive, I think you can track your progress, and it costs like nothing. A worm count. We have a high school group that comes out once a year, and I just say, go out there, fill a bucket up with soil, and let's count the worms. And we've done that 2 years now. We've already seen an increase in the places that we've composted. We've seen an increase in the places where we cover crop just over last year. We need a couple more years to see a trend, but something that simple. I mean, that worms are an indicator of biology. They are biology. So I think there's a lot that we can learn just from simple tasks. Root depth. If you ever pull a root out and it goes 6 inches deep and then takes a left and goes sideways, you might have a compaction layer that's 6 inches deep. I mean, think about if your plant root is spending all this time going sideways to hold itself up, to keep its structure, that's energy that it could be putting into your fruit. So think about a stressed root and what that does. Think about if you pull your root out and it's covered in soil. Has anyone seen that? Like a Rastafarian root. That's called the rhizosphere, rhizosheath. That's like the most biologically active part of soil. And that's where all the magic's happening in there. So if you have a lot of soil stuck to your roots, that means it's a good thing. So maybe shake that off and weigh it. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot you can do. This is the infiltration test. And tomorrow I think y'all are doing a tour, so you'll see. This is like a really special site because we have wetlands over here, and then we have grasslands over here. So like in our growing fields on this side, it's heavy clay, and then our growing fields in the front area, it's like really heavy sand because that's kind of like in a riverbed. So what we're doing is we're testing how fast the soil can take water in and absorb it. So the soil from back here, since it's clay, I'm trying to speed that number up. I'm trying to get it to absorb faster through organic matter, through compost, through aeration. And then the soil up in the front, since that's sand particles and it has a tendency to absorb really quickly or take water in really quickly. I say absorb because that means it takes it and holds it in. So it's not quite absorb, it's infiltrate. I'm trying to slow that number down with sand. So that all you need with this is just a pipe and a hammer, and you hammer it in and you pour water down the pipe and you see how long it takes the water to soak into your soil. If you don't have a pipe, if you don't have a sieve, I mean, just use your natural senses. This is in our DNA. So if it smells bad, don't put it on your plant. If it smells bad, don't eat it. So I work a lot with compost. And in my early days, before I really got the hang of this, I would smell rotten eggs and vinegar and sour milk, vomit, and decaying flesh. And you think, well, why would vomit smell be in my compost? And no one's vomited in there. I have not put any decaying flesh in my compost. Why would these smells be happening in my compost? That's because the same microorganisms, the same bacteria that decomposes rotting flesh is living in my compost. I've created the conditions of rotting flesh in my compost. So I need to fix that. So you need to learn these smells and you need to adjust based off of that. Does everyone know what a sommelier is? It's the person who can tell you if you got fancy wine and where that wine came from. It's the same thing that I'm doing. So a sommelier can hone in on where a wine is made because they're identifying the gases produced by that fermentation in that region of the world. I mean, it could be like the wood that's making the barrel, the trees that are grown to make that wood, but you say, oh, that fermentation tends to happen in that small town in Italy, and that's how I can identify that. So you can do the same thing with compost. Like I can identify my compost from Florida. It's very different than the compost from here. The most important thing, if it smells bad, don't put it on your plants. don't eat it. And this, we're getting pretty far off, but like this DNA has like followed us through history. So where did the idea of ghosts come from? It could be from bacteria. So the phosphine gas that is produced by this flesh-eating bacteria, it's clear and odorless, but it tends to glow like an orb in the night. So you could see where the idea of ghosts might come from if they're orbs glowing above grave sites. So it's pretty cool stuff. Really, all to say, it's really a good idea to learn how to identify anaerobic bacteria. That's the bacteria we don't want on our plants. That's the bacteria that gets us sick. And it almost always smells bad, and it gives out a black residue, and it compacts. It's not the living conditions you would want. Low oxygen. You don't want that. So I see this in my compost. I hope to not see it as much as I used to, not so much anymore. But if I see, for example, steam coming out of my compost, yeah, you start and you're like, I want to get my compost hot. You don't want it to get that hot. You know, depends. It depends. If I want super bacterial compost, yeah, get it really hot. But if I start seeing it turn black, that means it's gone anaerobic. If it starts to smell bad, that means it's gone anaerobic. And I need to introduce oxygen in some way. And the same is true for your soils. Your soils can start stinking if there's not enough oxygen in the system. So you're really looking, your soils needs to be like a rich 70% cocoa bar brown, not black. So this like black gold thing, it really sells great because it's black gold, but like 70% cocoa chocolate gold, that's what we're looking for. It's just dark brown. You need to see some brown in there because that's the color of humus. And then just looking at it, like looking at soil. I mean, this soil, I love the color of this soil. Okay, I love that. What I don't love is there's no plant roots in that soil. It looks pretty dry. It doesn't want to stay in that sponge texture. So this soil looks okay. What about this soil? Soil here on this side is freshly tilled. There's no life in that. That's dirt. This soil, I mean, there are worms in there. It's alive. Look at the roots. Look at all the air passages. Look at it wants to stay together. It's a sponge. It's noticeably moist. That's the soil we're looking for. And I can tell this soil has likely come from a forest because it's a little darker than 70% cocoa. Our veggie crops want that brown. This is heavily fungal soil because it produces more acidic conditions, and that's how it turns more black. You can tell a lot just by looking at soil. Soil on the bottom here, yeah, it's in a clump, but that's not an aggregate. There are no air passages. It's just solid. So that's just more of a clump. I can tell that soil has been agitated. That soil has been worked recently. That brown reddish color, that's the color of metals oxygenating. So I can tell that's been compacted for years and years and has recently been disturbed over and over again. But most importantly, I can tell it's dirt, not soil. And then this one, this is the A+, I'd say. Got a worm in there, got dark brown. And then you see where you took it from. It wants to clump up. It wants to be in this sponge. This top one, this is an interesting one because you can see the aggregates started to form, and then there's some factor of compaction on top of that. See how it's flattened out? So maybe like a heavy machine has been driving over that soil. There's something that's compacting your soil, which will eventually lead to low oxygen conditions. So compaction probably is going to be your biggest enemy. So understanding what to do to combat compaction, it's not this. You don't want to flatten everything. You don't want to kill everything. You don't want to till all the time. Something more like this. You want a cover crop. You want a live cover. You want a live root in your soil at all times. And it'd be preferably, you'd want a variety. I mean, if you throw a bunch of seeds out there, you don't know what's going to germinate this year. I mean, working out in the field, you know that certain conditions every year bring like all the tomatillos from years past, and this is the year of the tomatillo or whatever. The same will be true for your cover crop, and you'll get variety just by the natural conditions. We don't have time to cover crop everything, so we can kind of emulate what a cover crop does. So this is broad forking. If anyone is a farmer, you've broad forked. This is so you're trying to penetrate an air passageway into your soil. And you're trying to disturb it much less than you would in a till. A tilling event, you're churning it up like in a blender. And you see all these big chunks, those remain intact and those remain alive. So you're introducing oxygen below a compaction layer by forcing that knife in, but you're not turning the whole system up. And then on the flip side of this, you can kind of emulate what a cover crop would look like when it dies. So like a live mulch. So wood chips, fall leaves, straw, these are all things that will feed your fungal community. I always include this story of where we tried our best in our sandy soil that does not naturally want to compact. We thought, no, we're tilling this too much. So we started harrowing. Tilling is like a vertical movement that goes deep. Harrowing is a surface till that goes laterally. So we're trying to go less deep each time we till. So what we did was we would harrow between each planting, and we harrowed and harrowed and harrowed. And then when the NRCS came out with a penetrometer is a really cool thing that it's a probe that you stick down in soil and it will tell you how much force it takes to penetrate through each layer of compaction. So it's really good at telling how deep a compaction layer is and how bad that compaction is. We had a horrible compaction layer in our sand, only like 4 to 6 inches deep, because we'd harrowed so much at that level, we created a dead pan. So, I mean, we're the Botanic Gardens, like we live and we learn. But I think the most important thing is that we had an assessment at the end of that. And we said, well, how did our practice change things? How was our soil? So this is like our latest iteration. Just a lot of organic matter, a lot of compost, really thick applications. I think it's going to work. But next year I might be giving a talk about something I forgot. So always learning how to fit that puzzle to your own property and your own land, and always understanding that you're never going to have the perfect solution. There are always a bunch of different things. As a farmer, every year I have farmed, I've experienced some catastrophic weather event. And these things, they're a natural thing that happens. We have soil disturbance that happens from us tilling, but then soil disturbance in a natural environment comes from floods or fires or hail. This is 4 inches of hail we got in 2021. And working as a farmer, it kind of feels like you're at the front lines of like a climate crisis, like you really feel this. So we adjust and we try to make different growing techniques to fit our climate and the changes that we're experiencing. This is the crew that I just like absolutely love working with. That's what got me into farming. But now what keeps me into farming is my niece. And I think about the world that she's going to inherit, and I think about what we can do for her. The climate crisis and our role in that seems to always be do less. So reduce your emissions, reduce your energy expenditure. And it seems like the best thing we can do is like not exist, which is not the way I want to look at this crisis. I want to look at something that's proactive. Okay, and fixing our soil will fix climate change if we do it right. If we fixed all of our soil right now, 2 years, it would take 2 years to reverse climate change, just soil. So this is really an environmental endeavor, and that's what farmers are these days. So I came out to Colorado. I wanted to be a park ranger. I wanted to work in a national park, and I wanted to preserve what we have. But I think that's what is so enticing about farming and regenerative agriculture is it's one step further. We're bringing our soils back. We're taking it one step further than preserving. So that's what I got. And if anyone has any questions, please feel free. Yeah.
Some of our speakers today mentioned some of their prescriptions they're using. They're suggesting using an inoculant when they're fixing a soil. They're also having mushroom blocks available these days. what are your opinions using those and for soil?
So the question is for treating soil, other speakers have talked about inoculants or a block of mushroom spores, possibly introducing biology in that way. I would say, you know, you can't, like an inoculant, it's either going to survive or it's not. So like I would say like you'll hear like the bokashi compost where you'll get an inoculant from Korea and you'll ship it all the way here to Colorado, and we'll grow our compost using those microbes. And then when we put those microbes in our soil, does it want to live in a desert? Do those microbes want to live in a desert? So I tend to say, like, if you have the time and resources, do everything from on site and reintroduce the microbes that are already living on your plants back into your soil. But I don't think it's like something catastrophic. If you buy an inoculant, it's either going to survive and thrive or it's not. It's not going to like ruin your crops. Yeah.
But these mushroom blocks, they break down, is that just organic matter that the microorganisms are going to eat?
So first thing you said was, so you're just wasting your money. I'm not gonna say necessarily, but investing in an inoculant, you got to consider, is it going to survive? The mushroom blocks, whether you're introducing an inoculant in the mushroom blocks, or if you're introducing just more organic matter to break down, I would say, looking under a microscope, I see tons and tons and tons of spores that are just waiting for the right conditions to activate. So I would say it would probably just add to that pile. So I'd say it'd be mostly just the organic matter. I would love to try it personally, but you'd need the perfect conditions for that mushroom to really take off.
Because if you started saying 2 teaspoons of soil, how many individuals in
Like
it?
over
You
8 billion.
just start with your native soil and make your crop.
Yes. So saying if there's 8 billion microbes in 2 teaspoons of soil, yes, use your own soil as an inoculant, and use your vegetables as inoculant, because I'd say more bacteria lives on a vegetable than in your soil that you're trying to improve, because your soil that you're trying to improve is probably not in a good place.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Are you doing anything to create like microorganisms or biofertilizers and things like that?
Am I doing anything to create microorganisms or biofertilizers? The most I'm doing right now is like compost tea and extract. That's kind of a different way, but really with that, you're just taking the microbes that live on your compost and you're trying to get it to go off into water. So you're spreading that microbial population over a bigger period, a bigger space. One thing I've learned, just like rapid fire getting into compost, is a lot of material to move, and to move like 6 truckloads of material, 1 bucket by bucket in my skid steer. I mean, it took me like forever. So if you can stretch out those microbes in a tank of water, I think that's the great way to do it, is compost tea and extract. Yeah.
Rutgers, so thinking about agroforestry, and we're not growing generally an annual plant here, we're growing a perennial, and they enjoy that fungal soil. What's the recommendations? What's the thought process for transforming maybe an inert soil or a dead soil or into that old growth fungus form so that our trees are going to be like gas?
Yeah. Okay. So the question is, with agroforestry, we're talking about more of a perennial system. And what would my first steps to build soil for a perennial, more long-term, like trees and shrubs crop? What that would be? Is that okay? Yeah. So I would say whatever you're growing, think about where that plant would want to live. So like if it's a shrub, there'd be some trees around, there'd be some grass around. So what would be breaking down around it in its natural habitat, and then use those kinds of materials to make your compost. So like if it's a shrub and I want to introduce fungi, I wouldn't do just like 100% wood chips. 100% wood chips would be more for like a forest. For a shrub, I'd do like the branches, the twigs that fell off of a shrub, maybe some leaves from a tree nearby, still going to be some grass, but like thinking about it along the lines of what would be decomposing in that plant's natural habitat. Yeah. The question is, what's my stance on biochar? I'm hoping to start some experiments soon. I think it's like a source of carbon at the very least, but I have high hopes for it, and I think it can be a great way to like have like a long store of carbon for microbes to kind of like live in and around. But that's just my understanding. I haven't like studied it in depth.
Hey, Rutger, I appreciate the talk. Thanks for sharing with us today.
Thanks.
I'm thinking about my operation. We'll take a tour tomorrow to one of our prairie restoration sites. Two things I'm thinking about in our system. It takes us a year to transform from a field of grown grass into a seeded prairie. And I've got two major disturbances, one an herbicide application to get rid of the grown grass, and second, followed by a shallow power barrel. What are your thoughts around microbe dormancy? I'm just curious, I'm trying to think of, we're doing these two things that kind of shut down the system before we can get a diverse cover the following year. So I've got this kind of gap. Are your thoughts around microbes go dormant? Do you think we're like totally killing them and shutting them down? I'm just trying to kind of gauge where I'm at in that in-between world.
Okay. Yeah, the question was, we're restoring a prairie here on site. And we've tilled and we've cut down all the invasive species, and we've applied an herbicide to kill that invasive species. And then like, where do we go from there? That's a really good question. I tend to always overestimate what herbicides can do, the damage to the microbes. Microbe dormancy, they'll be there forever. So I think like if a bacteria goes dormant and doesn't have the food to eat, it will come back to life if the conditions are right. If you introduce chemicals into that, I don't know what those chemicals would do necessarily. And then like putting it on pause for a year, maybe introduce some kind of mulch in that interim, and keep it covered from, because dealing with like restoration, you're trying to like inhibit the invasive species from coming back at the same time as growing the native ones. So like it's a position I don't envy. It's like, that's a really tough.
Repeated shallow tilling is something we can overcome, but it's difficult. But I feel like we are shutting down the microsystem a little bit, or maybe a lot with an herbicide application. I'm trying to figure out how to get them to play, get that done. Possibly. For me, it's the aggressiveness of smooth grown. That's, without eliminating that completely, the stability of that plant in the long term will turn back to smooth grown is a big issue. And so that's where, unfortunately, that herbicide is my tool. But I don't love using that. So I'm trying to figure out a way to like shorten that down. But anyway, I really appreciate your thoughts on that. So get my brain turning.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, this is a great example of like, what do you do? I mean, we're trying to bring back native species, and like, I mean, I respect Eric's opinion on this stuff more than anyone's. So like, I don't know, to me to give advice on that really difficult challenge that you have is, I would never, but I can talk microbes.
We have a question from the Zoom folks.
Yes, go ahead.
The question is, I see that a lot of the citations on your presentation are from the Soil Food Web. Is this a resource you recommend for someone who wants to get started in learning more about soil?
Yes. So I think we can hear the question. Do I recommend the Soil Food Web? And the answer is yes. She's incredible. She's taught like 4 like full college graduate level kind of like really in-depth stuff, but they also have a great YouTube channel where they have big events and seminars, webinars, like pretty much every weekend for free. So check them out on YouTube and Google Soil Food Web.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes.
Curiosity, I think you alluded to this, but I've noticed just anecdotally on my side, in the compost pile, I'll compost added to a garden plot. Other garden plots I'm sheet mulching in place. It seems like the biology and soil quality is so much richer where I composted in place and then versus like made compost and added it to the soil. I'm just curious on your take for like the biology of like a big heaping hot compost pile versus the like slower kind of in place composting.
So the question is, would you recommend like composting in place where you're growing, like just composting right there? Slower compost versus rapid compost that I'm turning all the time, like taking all the plant material, making compost on my site and shipping it back. And the answer is like, it depends. It always depends. So like if you're turning your compost a lot, you're going to get a bacterial compost, and that's really good for like grasses. So if you let something sit for a while, you'd probably want to put a lot of like wood chips in it or fall leaves in it. That's the kind of decomposition that would make a fungal compost. So like hugelkultur is a great example of that, where you're like burying logs and leaves in compost and you're letting it break. This big mound breaks down over years, and you can grow it right into that. Ideally, once it's all the way broken down, it's going to be a food for a forest, basically, because it's so fungal. So like for trees, yeah, let it break down on site. For vegetable crops, you probably want to put some bacteria in there, turn it a little bit, and then bring it back. But generally, if it smells bad, don't put it on. So that's the main thing. Any other questions? Yeah.
In terms of that hard pan, so what do you do to break that hard pan with minimum disturbance?
Yeah. So the question is that if there's a hard pan of soil that you've created by tilling, what do you do to break through that? And this is this is my challenge, is like bringing the soil back that way. There's a thing called a keyline plow, and I used to be anti-keyline, but then I actually saw it in action because they're like, oh, it tills really deep. But what it is it's basically like a knife, and you just cut as deep as possible into your soil, and it kind of cracks those compaction layers. So in a bigger scale, that's the same thing you would do with broad forking. Like we were doing that on like a 4-inch deep compaction layer. With the keyline plow, you can actually like make water flow, like river areas. Like you map your site, you see where the water naturally flows, and then you keyline on the sites to like optimally absorb water deep. So to answer the question, yeah, there are ways to do it. I think there's a lot we can do if we change the machinery we use. It's not that like tractors are bad, it's just that we haven't adjusted the implements for regenerative ag. I think there's a lot we can do with tractors.
I didn't ask you to say that.
Yeah. I think like to scale up our food system, like we need to use big machines. So like, let's just adjust how we use those machines. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah.
So next up, we have Kelly Bull, who's with Permaculture Design, and she'll be talking about edible lands, garden design, and a community project.
Yeah. Hi, you guys, you made it to the end. Yay. And you're still looking awake. Yes, good. Hi, I'm Kelly Bull. I am a permaculture landscape designer in Colorado Springs, also an educator, and I also consider myself a garden coach. Very passionate about plants, soil, education, love teaching people. And so in order to give you kind of the edible landscape design 101, I'm just going to take you through how I did my yard. So it all starts with getting the next slide. Yeah, hold on. Which is this. Okay, so all starts here. My husband and I bought this little house in Colorado Springs, June 2021. So middle of the pandemic, we moved into Corona Avenue, Colorado Springs. So our friends and family thought that we were joking. We were not. Main criteria we had in picking out a house, and we bought this site unseen, was it had to be within a 30-minute biking distance for my husband to get to work, and it needed a yard for me. So this met both of those conditions. The yard was great for me because it was blank slate. Soil was hard as a rock, and I was ready for the challenge. So all was good. one thing I'll mention when we moved in, so this was moving day and we had unloaded the whole U-Haul, and I'm from Georgia, and in Georgia, there's Southern hospitality. And I was like, where are the neighbors bringing me my basket of muffins? And no one came. I received no eye contact from a neighbor. There was no neighborhood engagement whatsoever. So that was kind of a interesting first experience that one of my goals was to change. So to give you a little bit, should play a video. A little bit of context, here we are up in Denver. I'm down in Colorado Springs on the red dot. Zooming in, Colorado Springs downtown is where it says Colorado Springs. And I shouldn't move away from this, I guess. Oh, it will, so smart. So here we are in my neighborhood in this little triangular piece of the city called Stratton Meadows. And I'm in this really interesting spot where the arrow right there, oh, I have a laser, don't I? Well, there's a park, there's a community center, there's an elementary school, and then there's me, red dot, zooming in. And so this picture was from Google Earth. I think it was taken in maybe 2019. It looks super lush. Look at all that lawn. And then we moved in, and that's what the lawn actually was. It's just a field of weeds, and which I was okay with because look, that's diversity. That's better than a lawn. But then it quickly turns to this. And so in the middle of summer, it was just brown all until winter. When spring, it would pop up with some weeds again. So this is what I inherited with this yard, and I was psyched about it. When I thought about what I wanted my yard to look like, I had a couple inspirational people in mind. And so if you haven't been to Crimpy in Basalt, Colorado, this is Jerome's food forest. And when I saw this, I was like, this is how people should live. I want to live in a food forest. It is amazing. The bird life was incredible. It was so cool in temperature there where everything else was really hot. It was just lush. It was amazing. So huge inspiration. I'm sure, raise your hand if you have been inspired by Jerome's food forest. Okay, some of you. So if you get a chance, go there. It's amazing. So Jerome, huge inspiration. Then we have Willy Wonka, other inspiration. As a kid, this was a huge inspiration to me. I wanted to live in that chocolate factory. I wanted to roam around those pathways. I wanted to pick the candy as I strolled. That is what I thought life should be. So take those two together, Jerome and Willy Wonka, and you get what I wanted for my yard. So that's the picture. That's what we're aiming for. So I got started designing, and with every design, I start with a base map, which is just your current conditions. And the base map was super easy because there was really not much there. And so brown grass, so blank slate. So I wanted to turn it into this, to my food forest. I should mention, I live on a 1/7 of an acre. It is a very small yard. I was ready to pack it full of plants. I had a couple different goals for my yard. One was to grow food. One was to create a biodiverse ecosystem. One was to increase my neighborhood engagement so that I actually got some eye contact once in a while. And then the other one was to become a demonstration site. So I really wanted to show my neighbors what a yard could look like, because my other neighbors either had xeriscaping, but like the Zen-scaping of just straight rocks and no life, and it's really hot and inhospitable. Or there's some people that have astroturf, and then most of the people just had what I started with, which was just straight weeds. So really wanted to show what was possible, and really wanted that Willy Wonka feel. And eventually I would really like to welcome neighbors into my front yard to wander the Willy Wonka style. So this is what the design looks like, and then I'll show you how it progressed. One thing I want to mention is how special of a location this is. So my house is the yellow star, and then down here, the red star is a city-run community center. The green star up there is the elementary school. And there's a lot of walking happening in my neighborhood. And then, so the elementary school kids from the Green Star walk down that main street there. How do I do the laser middle thing? Hey, okay, so they're walking down this street to the community center before school and after school. That's where the before care and after care is. So there's tons of walking all the time down that street. Down here is affordable housing apartments. So there's lots of walking going on down there. And then this is the city park. So this is really active. So there's so much walking here, so much walking here, because that is also the public bus route and the main artery through the neighborhood. So this is South Corona. This is my street. This is the whole neighborhood, main artery heading through there. So lots of action is going on there. So when I want a demonstration site, I have plenty of eyes to see it. So it's just really exciting that I'm out in my garden working, planting things, and now I actually am getting that community engagement because people are peeking in at what I'm doing and walking their dogs and saying good morning. And so there's just so much more talking than there was before. And so it's just this really special location. Also, I should mention, this is a weird part of town where it's surrounded by the rich people is how I will put it. This is a more low income neighborhood, and the fancier area, the Broadmoor, is just to the west of it. So there's South Nevada that divides us, and the rich people are on this side, and then we're over here. And so there needs to be more pride in this area because it doesn't get a good reputation, and it's this really, really special spot, and we have a lot going for it. So I really want to kind of regenerate the neighborhood and show people what we could be capable of. Okay, so now we get to implementing the design. And so the first step is always plant the rain before you plant your plants. We've heard that before today. So here's what I did for that. So first of all, when you do a design, you always want to start with your pathways, and you always want to make it where you actually walk. Otherwise, you're going to cut through later, and you should have just built your pathway there in the first place. So you need to get to the mailbox, you need to get to the back of the car, you need to get to the front of the car, and then there's the sidewalk already. So when you get your pathways in, it automatically makes your bed shapes. So now I have my bed shapes and I need to get water to them. So you can't see in the picture, but there's a downspout, and the downspout runs under a pipe and it goes into that bed. These two beds, I have a laser. These two beds are getting water from runoff from the driveway here. And then there's runoff from the sidewalk here into this bed. And we'll talk more about that bed later. And then also these beds, so this guy here has another downspout going to it. These ones, really their main water just is from the raised pathways. If it rains, it kind of drips down in there. But because they don't get that much water from the roof or any water from the roof, I have very drought tolerant plants in here. So this is my pride and joy, my peach tree that gets the most water. So also these beds are sunken. So I went out to dig, and when I dug in, then I put the soil into the pathway. So it raised the pathways, lowered my beds, creating these nice little water basins to hold a lot of water in there. I will mention when I first put the shovel into the soil, eager, ready to dig that hole, put it in, it just went boom. Like wouldn't go in more than about 1/4 of an inch. Soil was so hard. And I really owe a lot of my success to huge piles of mulch. I got chip drop. If you don't know what chip drop is, it's like a middleman in between your local arborists, and you sign up on their list, and then arborists look at the list, and if they're in your area, they'll come drop wood chips at your house. And so I got a lot of wood chips. It was like Christmas when I got this delivery, and I mulched my whole yard. And when I went to plant the plants, it was 4 months later after I had mulched and went to put the shovel in, just kind of fearful, put it in, it went straight through. worms in the soil. I have really had really hard clay, and now it was this like lush, amazing soil with all of this biology in there. Really just from putting mulch on there. And then some of the beds I had manure from a rabbit from a neighbor. But really just like getting that layer on top hydrated the soil and transformed it super quickly. So it's amazing how fast you can transform your dirt. Okay, so step 2 is you planted your rain, and now you're ready to plant your plants. And one really helpful thing is I got a $750 residential native plant grant through the Terra Foundation. So that really helped start me off. And I started planting. The way I have things set up is the front yard is the majority are native plants, because I really want that to be the front yard demonstration site that people can wander through. And eventually I want to put signs so that people can get plant recommendations for their own yards. So it's kind of like a little mini botanical garden. So there's lots of diversity up there, mostly natives. I don't want to have to water it beyond rainwater. So I'm doing lots of really heat tolerant, drought tolerant plants, and that's southern exposure. Here are some of the native plants that I put in with that plant grant. So yeah, lots of heat tolerant, drought tolerant, got some nitrogen fixers in there, flowers, beautiful. We get fruit from chokecherries and plums and serviceberry. So lots of great plants there. And now here's what it looks like. And so I took a video, and I apologize, for some reason when it uploaded, it got really choppy. So if you get seasickness, close your eyes. But this is after a year and a half of planting all of these plants, and very minimal watering. I did some hand watering last year, maybe like once every 3 weeks. And so it's looking really good, and lots of action going on. We'll talk more about that sidewalk bed in a minute. And also my birthday was yesterday, and I had a bunch of people over, and I put flowers all over the tables, and I had so many flowers for making bouquets. It was just added bonus of having a garden. So thank you. So it's looking good. So that was the front yard, and now here's the backyard. This is starting to dig one of the basins in the backyard. So again, digging down and then putting the soil on the edges to raise the pathway up. And this is what it looked like last year. And so it's starting to fill in. And then so I think it was Creighton had said something about having like little plant islands. And that's very much what the backyard is like, where this is kind of my herb island. There's an aronia bush there for some fruit, and then herbs all around it. Then I have an apple tree here, another island there. There's an island in the back. And then over in the corner that you can't see, there's a cherry tree island. And then in the middle is more of my annual plants that are closest to the door and easiest to hand water if I need to. So lots of little islands. And then here's what's actually in the islands. So here's my apple tree guild. Give you a second to read that. And then I also just throw seedfuls of whatever I feel like in there to see what happens. And so there's lots of biodiversity in these beds, because I'm really just doing a lot of trial and error, and that technique of if it survives, then what did you call it? The stun method. Yeah. If it survives, it belongs. If it doesn't, it doesn't. That's why I do a lot of the seeds to see what pops up, and it belongs if it's there. Here are some plants that are in my plum tree guild. Got the Siberian pea for nitrogen fixing, and I have lots of comfrey around to help make more mulch, because now that giant mulch pile is gone and in my yard. So I'm trying to make all the rest of the mulch that I need. So I grow a lot of plants to be able to cut down and then spread as mulch. And then here is the cherry tree guild. And this picture is taken this year. Those other two were taken last year. And so it's going really well. One plant that's been amazing is the lovage. It is growing so fast and just, I mean, on rainwater alone that I can't eat it fast enough. It made a lot of lovage pesto. So it's just turning out to be a really good mulch plant that I cut back and then spread everywhere. But I'll tell you this, I put a video about doing that on social media and I got so much hate comments because I was wasting food. So people are real upset about using lovage as mulch. So just a heads up, but it's also fertilizing soil so that I can grow other things that I like to eat better, like cherries. Haters gonna hate. And then here is a video for the backyard. This one gets real motion sicknessy. So sorry about that. But yeah, lots of herbs. Lettuce. A lot of my vegetables this year, I just let bolt last year and then reseed themselves this year. And so they're just coming back and have these fun trellises that I just took this last week. So they're not quite covered yet. Got that comfrey. My grapes are finally growing up the pergola. This is a goji berry back here. So all of this, I mean, this is the second summer after I planted. So in 2 years, it's really grown a lot with really not that much effort, but once they got into the ground, it was not that much effort. It was a lot digging the basins and getting things set, but now it's set and it's, sometimes I wish there was more to do out there. Like, well, the weeds are under control from all the mulch. What am I supposed to do with my time? So I just wander around Willy Wonka style and I eat berries. That's my hop trellis. This actually used to be the hottest area in the yard because there's western setting sun would just beat on this wall. And that's our bedroom wall. And we went to bed and felt the wall and it was like 100 degrees. It was so hot. So I needed to shade it. So I built that trellis and now that shades the wall and keeps it really cool. And then we get a bunch of hops from it. And I should have put an actual hammock in there, so that would have made that picture better. So imagine. Okay, here is a picture of it last year. And here are a lot of squash vines. And I just wanted to throw this in here as kind of an added bonus. Even after just 1 year of planting, I was eating a ton of food. I had all of the herbs I'd ever needed for cooking. I had grown potatoes, there were tomatoes. But the biggest surprise was winter squash. I have a worm composting system and squash seeds when I ate so I bought a spaghetti squash from the farmer's market and I think a sweet dumpling from the farmer's market, and then put all of that, the seeds and pulp and stuff in the compost bin. And because those seeds are too big for the worms to get to, what happens is the seeds just get inoculated with amazing microbes that turn it into this like super crazy strong plant. And then when you spread your worm compost around your garden to nourish all the other plants, you are spreading a ton of amazing inoculated squash seeds all over your garden. So I had squash popping up everywhere. And because there wasn't really that much planted last year and there was room for it to spread, I let it go. And that is just one of the harvests that I did. I got 60 winter squash from not planting a single seed purposefully. So it's just amazing how much food you can get on accident. So, and they were delicious. And I mean, I actually have some still in the basement that are still good. So yeah, I got a lot of food out of it. So far I'm considering it a success because it's really feeling like Willy Wonka. I have some currants right now that are like really bringing in that feeling. So it's been really fun. So also, not only does it feel like Willy Wonka for me, but for all of the organisms that have started coming in, I took all of these pictures from my yard. So before, when I moved in, we had house finches that would come and kind of peck the soil. And that was really the only thing we ever saw. Oh, and wasps. So we had house finches and we had wasps. And now we have so many different birds, so many different insects. I have some garter snakes that moved in, which has been so fun, and butterflies, bees. It's just so great. If you're into birds. My husband keeps the eBird list. And so we went from 1 species to 26 within a year and a half. So lots of really cool stuff coming in. That's one really big goal of my yard is I try to plant as much bird food as possible, mostly through plants that host caterpillars. So I learned how important caterpillars are for baby birds. Even if a bird grows up to eat seeds later, I think it's 96% of birds all need caterpillars in order to raise their babies. So we all need more caterpillars in our yards. So I'm planting lots of caterpillar plants to bring the birds. Okay, so not only did Jerome inspire me, Willy Wonka inspire me, but also Brad Lancaster. Show of hands if you know Brad Lancaster, so I know how much to explain. Okay. This is Brad's street, and it used to look like this, and now it looks like this. He has totally transformed his neighborhood into this lush oasis where it used to be just really hot and dry and inhospitable in Tucson. Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Tucson, Arizona. And he did it all through curb cuts. So you can see here, there, I think, yeah, right there, he cut a slit in the curb, and he has a really funny story where he on a Sunday when nobody was looking, went out and cut this slit in the curb because all of this water was rushing by his house and he wanted it to water his trees and his plants. So he cut the curb so that the water now rushes into the bed and then waters the plants. He got in trouble with the city and they said, hey, you can't do that. We're going to fine you. And he said, fine, go ahead. They never did. They came back later and they're like, we're not going to fine you if you can tell us how you're doing this, because this is amazing. So now he has influenced the policy in Tucson. The city works with him as a consultant. He has just totally changed things. And now new builds, it's required to have curb cuts. So they're not having to do it retroactively. They're actually doing it as they build. So I wanted that. I saw that. I got to see his neighborhood. I was just like, yep, that makes sense to me. And so here is a picture of his street. I'm not sure when it was taken, a while ago. But then here's a picture of my street. So when I moved on the street, I had already been to Brad's house a couple years before, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is the next Dunbar Springs. That's his neighborhood. And it's these really wide streets, these small houses. It was in the low income part of town. It's just really hot. It could be amazing. So, I mean, look at the comparison. It's very similar. So I was really inspired and wanted to do curb cuts. But being in Colorado, we're a little backwards with our water laws. We know the old 110 gallons is as much as you're allowed to harvest of water off of your roof, which is like a literal drop in the bucket, not very much. So I didn't know how I was going to do this project. It seemed like an uphill battle. I'm just one person. Colorado has really strong water laws. Okay, so, but I'm looking at this right-of-way bed here and I'm thinking, man, that is just ripe for a curb cut. How am I supposed to do this? So also, if you don't know, here's another image of a curb cut. So here is the street, here is the curb, you cut it so then it flows in, and then you have a basin dug so that the water can fill it. When it's full, then the water just keeps rushing by in the curb. Okay. All right. So I didn't know how I would do it legally. I didn't want to go the legal route. I didn't want to go out on a Sunday and cut it, because I wanted to prove to the city that it's a good idea. I didn't want to get fined. And Brad had already paved that way in Tucson and made a model of it. So I just wanted to prepare, but I didn't know how I was going to get cut. So I started preparing and I started digging out this bed. So it looks in this picture like it's level with the curb, but it is, I dug out 8 inches of soil and then topped it with a ton of mulch and compost. So I just wanted to let it sit and hang out and be happy with this thick layer of mulch until one day I was able to cut the curb. So it's prepped, ready to go. And then I found out about this program called Leadership Pikes Peak, where it's people from all of these people all over the city, different jobs, come together. And I joined this program, and we met once a month for 10 months for a full day. And we learn about different aspects of the city. So there was like Education Day, Sustainability Day, Health Systems Day. So you learn about all of the issues that Colorado Springs is facing, how you can help, just really getting to know your city. And one part of this program is that you do a group project. And normally the projects are a nonprofit comes in and pitches their project, and our different groups pick different nonprofits to help out. But this time, as luck would have it, they said, we're going to give you guys a chance to pitch your project. So if anybody has a project to pitch, go ahead and pitch it. And my hand shoots up in the air, and I have 2 minutes to give my pitch. And I just told them the whole story about Brad Lancaster, and told them about my house and the community center and the elementary school and all the little kids walking. And I was just like super excited about it. And they picked my project. And so I got a team of 9 people helping me figure out how we were going to do this in Colorado Springs. So here's what we did. So in September 2022, that's when they chose my project. I got my group. And then we spent a really long time figuring out, like, who are we supposed to talk to? What are they going to say? What are some of the issues that they're going to have that we can already troubleshoot and have an answer for them before they even ask it? So it was a lot of just thinking time. And then we just really didn't know where to start. And somebody in my group works for NES, which for the life of me, I do not know what NES stands for. And I could not figure out on their website the acronym, but it's a landscape architecture firm, and they have a lot of contracts with the city. So they do a lot of city-wide landscape architecture. So her boss was Chris Lieberman, and he's worked with a lot of city projects with landscape architecture. So we talked to him, and then he sent us a list of 10 people we probably needed to talk to. So we got started on that list, which led us to Morgan Hester, who is in the planning department for the city. And everybody we talked to was like, man, this is such a great idea. I don't know who makes this decision. And so they would give another list. So Morgan gives us another list of 10 people. And so we start working on that list. And so then we talk to Gail and Tyra in the city, they're city engineers, and they work for construction for the city. And then we got the whole engineer side of things, and it'll need to be this strong and a bunch of different other criteria, but you'll need to talk to these 10 people. So we got another list. And then we talked to Richard Mulady and Aaron Powers, who were really helpful with stormwater management. And they were great because they had just written a green infrastructure manual saying how curb cuts should be done in the future for new construction, but there was still nothing for retroactive. And so they were like, man, that's really great. We just still have no idea who's going to make this decision because all of our stuff is for the future. They also gave me a really good point that if you're doing this in your towns ever, don't say water harvesting. If you say water harvesting, red flags go up and everyone's like, no. But if you say stormwater management, then you are solving a problem. Yeah, so always say stormwater management. We're just harvesting the water in the soil. We're not putting it in an actual receptacle. That's a really important distinction. Okay, so then Gail was really concerned about utilities in the right of way. So a lot of times utilities are buried under there, and that was their biggest worry. And they're like, you'll never be able to do it. You'll never be able to, you'll have to talk to the utilities company. So I called 811 and they came out, and it is a miracle because there are no utilities in my right-of-way bed all the way down the entire street from beginning to end. The other side of the street has like gas, I think, but on my side, it's free and clear, free to dig. It's a miracle. So I call her and I'm like, guess what? Utilities aren't a problem. She's like, okay, I still can't make the decision. So I think you probably have to talk to Gabe. So we go talk to planning supervisor. This was like the big finale. We thought was the big finale. Everybody here was pointing to Gabe saying, you're going to have to fill out a permitting process. So we're like gearing up, ready to fill out this permitting process. I finally get a hold of him and he's like, oh, residential has nothing to do with me. I don't know who you talk to. Try talking to Patrick Morris. So we're like, okay, go talk to Patrick Morris. For some reason, Patrick Morris is feeling spunky that day. He hears that I've talked to all of these other people before him. He is flattered that all these people are his bosses. And he is like, man, they're letting me make this decision. I said, yes, go ahead, make the decision. He says, let's do it. So he says, let's do it. And I say, okay, when? And he says, how about next week? And I say, yes. And so we had a construction contractor, or a concrete contractor come out, give us a bid. They bid us $350 for 2 4-inch holes drilled into the curb. And I said, let's do it. And Patrick Morris said, we can skip the whole inspection process if I'm just there while they're drilling. I say, great. So he comes and I get a $300 garden club grant from the Manitou Springs Garden Club. So nice of them, because it only cost me $50 to finally cut the curb, which was amazing. Thank you. So here's a video. Oh, this was a video. Did it start? No, it's a different one. Shoot. Well, this was a video showing you, I was filming myself going out to the curb cut, and I'm saying, like, I feel like it is Christmas. This is finally happening after 10 months. I'm getting my curb cuts. And then there's a guy drilling the curb cut, so you could actually see what it looked like, but for some reason it's not playing. Anyways, here's what it actually looks like when it's working. So yeah, it flows down, goes through that 4-inch hole in the curb, and then fills up my bed. And here it is filled there. So there's 2 of them. There's one right here and there's one down there. So also work in progress, because I need to build the basin a little bit bigger. I haven't been able to do that because it has been raining almost every single day for the last month, and I don't want to dig when it's wet. So I'm waiting, but the basin will be bigger and it'll be reinforced with stones to keep a lot of erosion from happening. So work in progress, but they're working really great. And I have had that really hard clay soil, but this fills up and then in an hour, it's all infiltrated. So it's draining really great. The soil is really healthy. The plants are growing really quickly. Only thing that is happening is that the holes are getting clogged with sediment after a really big rain. So it washes in here. But that can be solved with more curb cuts also. So we'll talk about that in a second. And sediment traps. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's also part of the next stage of digging it deeper in a sediment trap. Yeah. And then I also put this is from the Curb Corps, and it's now on my office desk as a trophy. It's like this big, and it's really kind of beautiful. It has all those little aggregates in there, but it is a sign and a reminder that we can do hard things, and you can not know where to start and then get started and get it done. Okay, so then just to think back to my street, and there I am, that little lone star with the curb cut. And imagine if everyone had a curb cut on my street and everyone had a tree in their sidewalk bed. That hot, wide street is then going to be cooled down. If those trees had berries that fed us and fed the birds, added bonus. And also with that sediment issue, I'm taking on all of the sediment of my entire street. If everybody had a curb cut, it wouldn't be a problem. And everybody would be getting a little piece of the sediment pie. So more the merrier. Right now, as it stands, I am the only one able to have the curb cut because I am the pilot project for the city. My next step is I'm really documenting it, taking a lot of videos. And so then I'm going to go back to them and present to them really just Tucson's plan of their permitting process, where they have it all written up, and it's already in place. So I'm just going to cut and copy that, send it to my city, show them that mine works. They can see it in action at my house, and that we need more of them. And it's been amazing because I put a video up on my Instagram account and it went viral. People are going crazy over curb cuts. So right now, I think it's 17,000 people have seen this video, and it just keeps getting shared all the time. And I'm getting all of these messages from people all over the place, but most people in Colorado Springs saying that they want one. How do they get on board? So really, really excited about it. And so I'm really building a team of people who want it, so I can show the city we've got to figure something out because there's appetite for it. So imagine that street being green. Imagine all of those side streets coming off of my street, greening up with curb cuts. Imagine that whole little triangle of Stratton Meadows, all nice and green. That is really my vision. That's where I'm headed. I really want to make this a little pride and joy demonstration site for the whole city. And here's some more of my dreams. This is also Brad Lancaster's in his neighborhood, Dunbar Springs. In that intersection where the kids walk to the community school, people run the stop sign all the time. It's really, really dangerous. And we need to slow the traffic down. And that's what he was doing with his circle too. And then there's curb cuts in there. So that huge water harvesting spot of concrete here is now hydrating all of those plants there. So that's my next big goal. I know that was really expensive to put in, so gonna need some money. So just imagine that right there in that intersection. So those little kids are walking here, and then the public bus, the trash trucks, every car is just zooming down the street. So we really need to slow that traffic down and make it safe.
Is that before we stop?
Yep. Yeah. Another dream of mine is to have public art. I'm just imagining this green, lush, tree canopy filled road with public art all the way down it. When people are riding the public bus, they're just really enjoying their experience. All of my neighbors, when they're walking down to say hi to me when I'm gardening in my yard, are just having the best experience. So I just really want to turn this neighborhood into this amazing place. Here are some of my major goals for the neighborhood. I want to make it beautiful. Right now, it's really, there's not a lot of pride in the neighborhood, and there's just so much potential. It's a really hidden gem. I need the shade. It is so hot, and I'm heat tolerant, so it's really selfish that I actually just want the shade, but I know everyone else will benefit from it too, so we need some shade. Stormwater management, not water harvesting. So we're really managing the stormwater. Yeah, supporting all the native wildlife, birds, and pollinators, so important to me. I am passionate about education, and I want that eye contact from my neighbors. One thing I will say about that is it's already gotten so much better. I tell a story about my next door neighbor who has privacy fence around her whole front yard and backyard. So it was like 5 months before I even got a glimpse of her because I had peeked through the fence like a creep. And I was just like, I gotta know who lives over there. And so I peeked through, and she's back there with a guy fixing something, and they're chatting, and I wait for a pause in the conversation, and I'm like, hi neighbor. And they pause. And I'm like, mind if I peek my head over the fence? And she was like, okay. And I peek my head over, and I'm like, hi, I'm Kelly. And so introduced myself, and she's a little put off at first. And now she came to my birthday party last night and brought me a present, got to meet all my friends. And she's in my garden club that I started. So it's really just me and her and the lady across the street. And then she got her neighbor across the street to join. And then she got her neighbor next to her to join. So it's really just, it's spreading. So it just took that one head over the fence moment, and now I'm getting tons of neighborhood eye contact, which is really great. So it's happening. Another dream of mine is to create jobs and training, and so taking care of these beds I think would be an amazing thing to do. And I love teaching people, and I just think it would be awesome. So I want to train people with horticultural training, and then want to make it a model for the city. I want to show it off. So ways you can help. Number one is getting on the Colorado Springs Curb Cut Support Team. So if you want to stay in the loop, if you scan that with your photo app on your phone, it'll take you to my little sign up page, and then you put your email address in there, and that'll keep you in the loop of what's going on, any announcements. If you want to come to a meeting, we'll have some virtual ones, but that is an option. And then funding guidance. So now I have a couple ideas in here with the Inflation Reduction Act and the NRCS. And if anybody has any ideas of where can get money to make this happen, my neighbors don't have the money to get the curb cuts, to dig out the beds, to buy the plants. So I need to figure out how to make it economically viable for them. I know a lot of people are really interested. Once I cut that curb, there was a lot of curiosity. They came out to see what was going on, and they thought it was so cool. So the word is spreading through the neighborhood. Lots of neighbors already want it, but it's not very financially feasible for them right now. So please let me know if you have ideas, need some money. If you know any ally organizations that I can work with, I would really love to be teaming up with people and growing that support team. I am just my own person right now. I could use lots of help. I don't always know what I'm doing, and it would be great to have other people who do. And then just spreading the word, telling people what's going on in Colorado Springs, that this is happening. And that's what I need. So I think that's it. Thanks for coming. Did I talk really fast too? I'll put that back up in case anybody wants the QR code. And I talk really fast when I'm excited. I'm very excited. So sorry if that was too fast. Any questions? Pretty self-explanatory. Yeah.
Do you have a day job?
Yes, my day job is, she asked if I have a day job. My day job is I run my own landscape design company. And that's a really good question because the landscape designs pay the bills, but this has really sidetracked me where I just want to do this all the time. And I just have this vision and I want it to happen. And so my brain space is really taken up by this. So yeah, it would be awesome to get paid for doing something like this at some point. So yeah, if you have ideas for that too, that would be really great. Yeah.
So for folks who want to replicate it in their own cities,
Yeah.
what is your thought or recommendation now that you've gone through it yourself in terms of like, hey, here's the spot to start at?
Mm-hmm. First, I think the question was, thank you, where do you start if you want to start this in your own community, your own city? And I think first you start with a support team. So that Leadership Pikes Peak program was really helpful because I had all these other minds to bounce ideas off of and people with different strengths. And so getting a team of people who are interested first, and then talking to your city. And I think I don't know how to do it other than what we did, where we just do shots in the dark and then follow where we can, you know? And then also showing where it's happened before. So now Brad has done it. You can show all of Tucson's information. You can show that we're doing it in Colorado Springs. I know that Brad was just in Boulder talking to the city there, and he had just talked to me, knowing that we were doing it in Colorado Springs. So he was able to tell Boulder that Colorado Springs is doing it. So imagine Boulder wants to beat Colorado Springs and do it bigger and better. So like this is snowballing. So I think that it's happening now where there's enough examples that it's not as scary for cities. So yeah, I think showing that other people are doing it and just start with one person. Yeah, takes persistence and some luck. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah.
You had mentioned that your area that you live in is low income, and it would be great for it to be fully realized. Are you worried about gentrification in the future? If that does happen, people might start doing this.
That's a good question because it's already happening on the other side of the street. Thank you. She is asking if I'm worried about gentrification with just improving the area. Yeah, and it is already happening on that side. We're in this really unique spot where all the houses are the same house, same size as mine. So mine is a rarity in the neighborhood. It has a basement, and so it actually has 1,200 square feet, but everyone else's is about like 750 square feet. So they're very small houses, small lots that if you wanted a big house or you have a big family, there's not really a spot for you in the neighborhood. So it is kind of insulated in that way where you can't build anything super grand and the houses aren't grand themselves. So, but yeah, I do worry about that. But we are seeing, so there's a lot of older retired people that live on that street. And now we're seeing like younger couples coming in, some very small families. But so far it not showing signs of gentrification in our little triangle. It just seems like protected there. It's like this kind of little forgotten piece of the city. And I hope it kind of stays that way and we just keep it, yeah, but that is a valid concern. Yeah. Anybody else? Great, thank you.
So, next up, we have Chris Jones with University of Arizona Extension. And Naomi Zamora from NEFA following, and they will kind of give us a end of session wrap up, summary, some take home thoughts for our day.
Thank you, Steve. First, let's start with applause for this afternoon's speakers. We had AJ, Amy, and Bradford, and Kelly. And I think we had Donna here who must have started with the end in mind because each one just kind of built on top of what we learned today. And so I was taking down a lot of notes. And like Jim tried to put these common threads together. I mean, the obvious thing in the common thread was the soil's health. And it was all about how do we feed the soil? How do we water the soil so what lives in it can do its thing, right? So to do that, well, we needed to plant the water. And so we learned about key line design or contour swales or barriers that you know, in the old terms. And so just by working with the contour of the land, giving that water a chance to slow down, stay on site, we started creating the water that the soil organisms desperately need to be able to live and do their thing. Added the compost. And then put in the trees, put in the plants. So how those fit into agroforestry systems, trees that provide food, a nitrogen fixer that goes along with that, which is brilliant, just the shrubs, and just getting the roots to grow in that contour swell. Again, feeding those microorganisms, feeding the soil. So just to see how everybody kind of built up with what AJ started with, the holistic management design. And then I'm sure Kelly here started with the end in mind, just like Donna did with the 4 speakers we had. You know, the 7 habits of highly effective people. Were you doing all that, Kelly? Was that conscious thing that AJ started with this morning? But she certainly did it all, didn't she? I mean, here she was, did all those types of steps. She knew where she wanted to go, got the first thing done, and then I want to do the whole neighborhood, sharpen the saw, right? Next step. So that was just really exciting to see. Just some of the finer points that I picked up on, boy. I like the idea of using a honey locust. honey locusts grow in so many places, nitrogen fixers. You know, if you can have a source for the pod for forage, then you get the fence post out of it. That is really, really cool. Bring up the old boomerang swell. So those are places that we can be doing that type of work and on a smaller scale. So that works too. Amy came again, all about the earthwork, doing the contour swells. So much success that she's able to document because of the research they're doing, just the changes in the soil being hundreds of fold more productive. Wow. I think I was asking about definitions this morning. I think I finally understand what regenerative agriculture actually means after today. Thank you, speakers. Rutger, you taught soil health in a way that's accessible to all of us. So thank you for teaching that in a way that isn't, you know, we understand the difference between soil and dirt. So I think I tied those together because I went to Kelly right away. So what I'd like to do now is introduce to you Jomi Zamora. He is with the USDA National Institute of Food and Agriculture. And he is a program manager for agroforestry and other forest and related programming. And this is the guy who decides what should be on the grants. You know, when you're doing a grant, what types of measures are we trying to do? So he is here because he wants to talk with all of us. And so I don't know if we're all getting together this evening, but tomorrow we'll all be on the bus. And so please get a chance to talk with Jomi with ideas that you have that would be useful. Like we're just saying, the grants are hard to access for a lot of us. And if you're working with Native American tribes, that's even harder. So, or underserved communities like Kelly's neighborhood. So just ways to make that accessible. So Jomi, why don't you take it from here? And stay close to the microphone.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Chris. And again, I am Jomi Zamora. I am a national program leader with the National Institute for Food and Agriculture, NIFA, which is an agency of USDA. And prior to coming to NIFA, I worked as a professor in forestry, agroforestry at the University of Minnesota. So I had almost 16 years of experience doing agroforestry research and extension. So agroforestry essentially is in my blood, you know, so to speak. Before even coming to the US to pursue my PhD, I worked for an agroforestry project globally through USAID on the sustainable agriculture and natural resource management. So I'm really very passionate about agroforestry. Therefore, when there was this opportunity to come to listen to you guys, I immediately requested permission from NIFA to come and to listen, to understand what you got, to listen to your needs, to understand what you guys have to say about some of the issues that you are, you know, facing with respect to agroforestry promotion and adoption. So that is my task actually over here. Please feel free to connect with me after the conference or even tomorrow's field tour, because I'm really interested to understand what your issues are, what are your needs, so that I would be able to integrate those in the development of requests for application that we usually send to all stakeholders, and we consider you all as our stakeholders. But before we do that, I'll just very briefly, how to use this? So very briefly, so what is NIFA? As I have said earlier, NIFA is the extramural science funding agency within USDA's research, education, and economics vision area. So this current fiscal year, we essentially have $2 billion in funding to use to do research related to agriculture and natural resources and environment. And we support investing initiatives that ensure the long-term viability of agriculture, of which agroforestry is part of the system. And essentially, we work with all universities to, to realize, to fulfill the mission of NIFA. So there are 3 or 4 priorities that we work on, which are essentially in line with the priorities of USDA, and this is about addressing climate change via climate smart agriculture and forestry. We've been talking a lot about climate change today, and advancing racial justice, equity, and opportunity. That's why I asked earlier about environmental justice when James was talking about the project that he is implementing with the tribal community and creating more and better market opportunities, as well as tackling food and nutrition insecurity. So these are the priorities that we are having right now within NIFA, which are consistent with the priorities of USDA. So as you can see in these slides, we cover we cover different types of topics. We cover a breadth of disciplines. So agroforestry essentially is part of this overall programs that we support in NIFA. However, considering that agroforestry is so complex, it's just hard really to find where agroforestry could really fit into all of these programs that we support. Nevertheless, I have listed several programs within AFRI, within NIFA, that support agroforestry. We have NIFA, the $2 billion funding that we have, that dollars are allocated either competitive or through formula-based projects. And for the formula-based projects, if you are working in a university, we support agroforestry research and extension projects through the McIntyre Stennis Research Program, as well as the Renewable Resource Extension Act. This is an extension program. So if you are working with the university, work with your deans, with your experimental station director to propose agroforestry related projects, either through research or demonstration. So that is the capacity programs where we use formula metrics to allocate funding to all universities with forestry research. And for the competitive programs, earlier with the last presentation, there was a slide about funding recommendation and opportunities, something like that. I have listed this down, different, opportunities within AFRI, which is the flagship program of NIFA that supports funding related to agroforestry, sustainable agroecosystem. Most of the agroforestry research falls under the sustainable agroecosystem, as well as on the soil health. There's a specific program about soil health in NIFA. So there's a presentation earlier about soil health and pollinators. So feel free to reach out to me, and I can direct you to program leaders who could help you on this one. I call it the sustainable agroecosystem as well as the soil health program. So I know the priorities of this program, and I've already integrated agroforestry as a system that we support under these initiatives. And also, I'm not gonna read through all of these. Feel free to reach out to me. Earlier, I asked about this question about small business innovation research. What I am envisioning as a program leader in NIFA is that I really want agroforestry to take off, so to speak. And I know that there are technologies out there. There are practices that are worthwhile commercializing, so to speak. So if you are working with small businesses with some innovative ideas of how to promote agroforestry, I lead that program. So feel free to connect them to me. There's a lot of opportunities out there that you could take advantage of for the sustainable agriculture. The presentation earlier on the forest, food forest, obviously the sustainable agriculture research and education SARE program supports this kind of idea. So reach out to your regional coordinators of how you could take advantage of these opportunities. So currently, I am working on this document. I got a directive from US Congress to report what NIFA has done so far in terms of silvopasture, because that's what they are. That's what the specific, requirement, the specific request from Congress right now to NIFA. Since I lead the program, so I'm now, addressing this. So as I look through the database that we have at NIFA for the past 10 years, we only have 16 silvopasture related projects, and there were only two projects supported by silvopasture. What I'm just trying to say is that, if we could, through this directive that I'm trying to develop right now, that's why I'm here, to listen, to understand to you what information I could provide to this directive so that Congress could read it. Why is this silvopasture is needed? So I need to have data about this. So if you have those kind of information, please feel free to, give it to me. And I'm hoping to submit this requirement next week because Congress has been asking it to me. So if you have that, if you have that information, again, the primary reason is Congress now recognizes that silvopasture could help address climate change as an adaptation strategy, as well as provide economic income to farmers. So that is what they want to know. So maybe they're thinking to allocate more funding, related to silvopasture. So climate smart agriculture, as I have said, it is a buzzword right now in USDA. So we have integrated this phrase in all of the appropriate funding programs that we have. And environmental justice, addressing the needs of the minority serving, the underserved communities, So essentially, NIFA is now mandated to allocate funding to addressing the needs of underserved communities through research and education. And traditional knowledge, so we support this as well. Agroforestry is a form of traditional knowledge. So if you have these ideas, please, reach out to me and I would be able to direct you to the right program. Reforestation strike team, I don't have to say any more of this because it's not out yet, but possibly in the near future, there is going to be a high demand on agroforestry, high demand of tree planting using agroforestry. So that would be coming in the pipeline. We don't have the mechanism yet, so to speak. Oh, sorry. So, as I have said earlier, I've just been really visioning how I would be able to help bring agroforestry in the mainstream through my position at USDA. So please talk to me. What keeps you at night? What are your frustrations about agroforestry? How could we make it, more adaptable by the community? So that's the primary reason why I'm here. So thank you so much for your time, and I'm very much happy to welcome any questions or thoughts that you guys have. That's my address, so feel free to reach out to me as well. Yes.
So because actually the technical assistants are developing or commercializing innovations has that mandate. How do you reconcile that with environmental justice and traditional ecological knowledge to make sure you're not acting in an extractive way towards communities. So, that you're learning from communities, but you're not learning. Like with the whole commercialization process, you're doing that in an extractive way. That makes sense.
You too. I just get it.
So because there's this kind of effort to commercialize new technologies through AFRI, and you have a mandate, to support environmental justice and traditional ecological knowledge. How are you reconciling those two things so it doesn't become extractive and so that you're supporting communities without just taking knowledge and commercializing it?
That is a very good question, actually. And in fact, right now, we are still in the process of developing this environmental justice guidelines. It's just the beginning. So we are still in that stage of developing guidelines and strategies of how to make it. We don't know yet, how is that going to play out? Unless you guys know from the forest, US Forest Service side. So sorry, I couldn't provide you a definitive answer. I know it's a good question, but
I just thought your question earlier was like. Good.
yeah.
Just wondering how. Engaging with that.
And James?
Very interesting. I know that a lot of the folks here in this room are not like researchers. And so which of these programs would you steer these kind of folks to? Would it be like SARE or some of the other programs more relevant? When you're not a researcher, more of a practitioner, maybe?
Yeah, in fact, when the question was about most of the farmers over here, most of the people over here are not farmers. And what I have presented essentially are mostly research that are designed for academia, so to speak. SARE is one of the examples that you guys can take advantage of. But what I could possibly suggest, if you guys are very much interested to learn more, to address the issues that you guys, to have answers of the issues that you have, you can work with researchers from the universities. And then they can just use these opportunities to develop, address your questions. That is another way to, to look at it. That's why we have this farmer managed, farmer researcher collaboration partnership kind of research.
A lot of those like the SARE calls for proposals through SARE often involve researchers and practitioners.
Yeah, and in fact, some of these programs that I have listed over here, it has it has the extension and research component. It should be integrated together, so they can work with a particular researchers. That's actually the notion that we have, that agroforestry can only be supported by SARE, but there are programs that are integrated that can do such thing as well. All right.
I have a question about, so for me, a lot of the regenerative movement is about like, there's not best practice, it's really context specific. So as these pieces move more towards a national level, do you think there will be like some prescription that comes with it? Like regenerative agriculture looks like this, agroforestry looks like this, silver pasture looks like this. And I think that's one of the things that I'm being really nicely today is that there's all these different applications. And it doesn't necessarily look like one to another, but that's one of the things I think that deteriorates as it gets to a national funding level, because the programs have to look in a box, and that's the regenerative agriculture does, is it tries to do some other things.
Yeah, that is a very good question, because even right now, we just don't have a common definition of agroforestry or regenerative. The concept is kind of new to a lot of people, so that's why it's just hard to to put that into the mainstream because of that differences and understanding of the practice. We don't have any common definition of these practices of agroforestry, even in NIFA. Some of my colleagues don't even know what agroforestry is. So I'm really trying to educate them about the practice. So hopefully, I just don't know when, that there would be some prescription about that. That's why my goal is, in addition to the programs that I have listed, my goal is to have a specific program that supports agroforestry only, so that we can, we can avoid those kind of confusion.
One other question, I think I was speaking with Andy over there, correct me if I was wrong, is one of the things that brought you to agroforestry was trying to get the pigeonholing out. So how do you see like your interaction when you come meet with us and find out like, hey, we need funding that doesn't work with grant cycles, we need it to work with agriculture cycles, and we need agroforestry to not have a title. How do you take this information back to your team, and how do you see like this conversation taking grant funding?
Yeah, sure. Considering, let me just repeat the question. I think the question was about the issue of grant cycle and the timing of agroforestry cycle, so to speak. We have been discussing about that actually, and that's the reason why agroforestry is not really quite supported by other programs within NIFA, because of you will not realize immediate benefits of agroforestry. Therefore, what I have been trying to advocate within the institution is to come up with, a specific agroforestry program that can only support agroforestry, and so that we can continue to support funded programs like SBIR, the Sustainable Business Innovation Research. We have phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1 is just a proof of concept. And we want them to continue improving that innovation by providing them funding through phase 2. That is what what I'm envisioning about an agroforestry program that is not bounded by a specific duration of the grant cycle, like good for 3 years. Hopefully, it could be up to about 10 years because of the recognition about the the realization of long-term impacts of the practice. So that is what I am trying to work on. All right, thank you so much.
Steve, could I go with the wrap-up then?
Yeah.
First, I'd just like to, for tomorrow, in preparation for our field tour, we're gonna meet in the parking lot, public parking lot, so they'll come through the ticket area. And the bus will be there, but we're gonna go with Eric and Eric's over here, so look for Eric. And I don't know, Josie's still.
I think she might have stepped out. I think she might be in the field right now, but yeah, the two of us will plan to meet you there.
Hey, Donna and Chris, this is Beverly representing the Zoomies. If you want to just close out the conference before you go into logistics, then we'll end the recording. So if you want to just do a quick wrap up, thank you. We'll stop recording and then you can talk about all the logistics.
Okay, thank you. Bev keeps us on track. First, and thank you, Bev. And I think the biggest thing I want to do is just thank all of you in this room, all of you, the people that are in the audience that are doing things back at their properties, all the presenters, all the moderators, all the summary folks. And we have our partners, the Arizona Community Tree Council. Without Amy and Bev, we wouldn't have this happening. As you can see, they keep us together. And the SWAAN team, we have some of our original envisioners of even creating SWAAN. Most of them are sitting at this table and standing over here. Maybe if you guys would stand one more time. And but there's And Chris is coming, stepping in. So there's a lot of stars in this room, but each one of you is one of our stars. So just thank you for being here. And we had some sponsorships from the Colorado State Forest Service. And from the Colorado Tree Coalition and from the Rocky Mountain chapter of the International Society of Arboriculture, kind of help me bring this to fruition. So just a big thank you to all of you. So Bev, who did I forget? You guys are.
Well, we need to thank you, Donna.
Yes. Thank you for whoever it was in the audience that acknowledged Donna. She has done amazing work to pull this together. Just, big hand to Donna right now because she really has knocked this out of the park. So thank you, Donna.
I think we'll all agree it takes a village.
There you go. Yes, and all the Zoomies appreciate all the work that you've done. So we're going to go ahead and sign off from the Zoomie world. Thank you again for everything. It's been an amazing experience, even here, not in the room. So good luck with tomorrow as well.
Bev, before you turn off, big thank you to my husband back here, Don.
Oh, yes.
Thank you. So in closing, I know a lot of you have to hit the road, but we do have logistics for tomorrow. Just meet in the parking lot at 8 o'clock. And if you're a little bit late, just run around